I'm wondering if I know we're kind of out of time, but if the organizers agree, we could extend a bit to have a discussion. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How about if we extend 15 minutes? Is that all right?
Yeah, I think we can do 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you, because it's just I can't end it right now. It's just like there's so much going on, and you really, all three of you, gave so many elements. The only question I have is, do you have questions for each other around the question of solidarity? Would you like to address each other's situations? Would you like to have a conversation among yourselves? Et moi, je vais, en fait, je peux aussi traduire, mais je pense que tout le monde ici, sur le panel en tout cas, parle le français. Après, je peux traduire en anglais si vous voulez. C'est comme vous voulez, hein. Vous parlez dans la langue que vous voulez. Moi, je traduis, il n'y a aucun problème.
Je vais commencer alors, si ça ne vous dérange pas. Donc, merci Serena, merci Sabrine pour vos interventions. Et donc, je pense qu'il y a des éléments communs par rapport à l'histoire des demandeurs d'asile, pas forcément par rapport à Serena, mais c'est par rapport à la terminologie, à l'identification, les catégories. Je pense que Sabrine aussi, tu as certainement rencontré ça dans les LOCS, comment elles se définissent, et par rapport à l'OFPRA, comment la catégorisation et la reconnaissance du statut de réfugié en tant que lesbienne, on va leur demander des preuves et tout ça. Je pense qu'il y a des liens entre les pays de départ, d'origine et le contexte européen et par rapport à ce qu'a dit aussi Serena par rapport au fait qu'on même la demande de fonds, il faut il n'est pas trop lesbienne, voilà, c'est pas trop lesbien,
oui.
Voilà, j'aimerais bien que vous puissiez, si vous voulez réagir sur ces aspects-là de catégorisation, surtout Sabrine par rapport aux demandeurs et demandeuses d'asile.
So I would like to translate it. Thank you. Melissa says thank you to both of the other panelists for your interventions, and that Melissa finds that there are some commonalities in the terminology, and especially in the fact that there are different terminologies from one site to another, and the fact that the categorization, the dominant discourse has a certain kind of categorization. In order to ask for refugee status, you have to conform to a whole series of categories that don't necessarily correspond to the country of origin, what's the way that things are talked about, which of course Serena told us quite a bit about. And so Melissa asks if Sabrine would like to also address it, because the LOCS deals with lesbians trying to ask for asylum. On ne t'entend pas, Sabrine, parce que il faut, voilà. S'il te plaît.
C'est bon?
Oui, c'est bon maintenant.
Lovely. Lovely. Alors, moi, je suis déjà, je suis toujours émue au fait d'entendre des lesbiennes qui se définissent lesbiennes, qui se présentent lesbiennes. C'est surtout dans ce monde très… on ne va pas rentrer dans le fameux conflit sémantique peut-être aux États-Unis avec le mot queer, mais en tout cas ici, ça n'a pas l'air d'être sémantique. Ça prend tellement d'ampleur que même les jeunes femmes lesbiennes se perdent. Et c'est vraiment un vrai problème. Et je suis ravie, franchement, d'entendre Serena et Melissa, en tout cas, se positionner. Merci beaucoup, Melissa, pour la question. Alors, qui est très importante. Cette question de comment on appelle ça, des catégorisations, de comment se définir, comment se nommer, effectivement, c'est quelque chose à l'OX. Alors, en plus, à l'OX, comme on est un groupe multiculturel, multilingue, c'est vrai qu'on a du mal à, effectivement, on baigne en tout cas dans plusieurs, pas mal de mots. Mais Melissa a parlé d'exil, puisqu'elle est exilée. Je suis moi-même exilée dans un pays en plus qui était le colonisateur de nos deux pays respectifs, l'Algérie et puis Djibouti. Et c'est vrai que dans notre exil ici en France, à un moment donné dans l'activisme, on va se limiter on va se limiter à utiliser le terme lesbienne. Mais ça ne veut pas dire qu'il est satisfaisant. It's not satisfying at all. I mean, using the word, lesbian. But we have to do to make a compromise, because the objective is to be concrete in our activism, in a kind of coherence, en termes pour être cohérente avec notre vécu de femmes, de lesbiennes et de racisées. L'autre, mais on l'utilise voilà, pour un petit peu faciliter les choses. Maintenant, pour ce qui est des demandeuses d'asile qui viennent en France et avec lesquelles nous avons travaillé ensemble, pour être honnête, la question ne se pose pas, honnêtement. La question de comment se nommer, que dire. Est-ce qu'il faut dire lesbienne? Est-ce qu'il faut dire woman loving woman? Est-ce qu'il faut dire ma divine en créole, lesbienne? Est-ce qu'il faut dire sahariya? Est-ce qu'il faut dire mithliya? Il y a plein de mots. Mais honnêtement, les demandeuses d'asile qui viennent ici ont une priorité, il faut le reconnaître, c'est la sérénité psychologique, la sécurité et avoir des papiers pour exister. Donc, ça ne veut pas dire qu'elles n'ont pas en arrière-fond, l'idée de comment elles se définissent elles-mêmes, puisque de cette manière, lesbienne, c'est blanc, c'est occidental. Donc, quand ils étaient, par exemple, au Mali, en Irak, parce qu'on travaille actuellement avec une Irakienne et une Malienne, et même une Angolaise, bon, la Malienne avait tendance à dire lesbienne. L'Angolaise, lesbians, or queer. L'Irakienne va dire le mot lesbienne, mais en arabe. Bon.
Okay.
Mais,
Sabrine, est-ce que je peux traduire un peu?
Oh, sorry.
Non, c'est juste que après je vais me perdre parce que j'ai
Non, sorry. Yeah. Excuse me.
Donc il faut que j'en cherche. Mais non, merci, mais je vais juste traduire pour un. Et après tu peux, bien entendu, on a très envie de t'entendre. So I asked Sabrine if I could just translate a bit, but though we are all very eager to hear the rest, but I need a pause now just to translate this. So Sabrine began by saying, I'm very moved to hear lesbians speaking. I always feel moved at that when that happens, and especially in this semantic world, and especially around, there are problematics around the term queer. In France, there are these problematics, and in France, young women are lost in the problematics of young lesbians of color are lost in the problematics of queer. So Sabrine thanks Melissa for this question. It's important, and the categories of how to name ourselves those are important. In Lux, we are a multicultural group. We have many languages, and Sabrine then says that about exile, that she's also in exile from Djibouti, and that in France, the group limits itself to the term lesbian, but it's not sufficient, it's not satisfying, and that the objective is to be concrete with our lives as women, as lesbians, and as racialized or of color. So for lesbians asking for asylum, the question of how to name ourselves It's, you know, it's an important question. There are many different ways, of course, Madivine in Creole, lesbian, of course, in French, also women loving women. But there's one major priority, and actually there are three of them. One is psychological serenity, security, and having documents. And in any case, the term lesbian is a white term. It's a Western term. But when Lux encounters women, lesbians in Mali or Iraq or elsewhere, they often also use the term lesbian or queer.
Thank you, Paula. Pour compléter ma question, par rapport, ma réponse par rapport donc à la question de Malissa, on vient maintenant, et à juste titre, Malissa, tu as bien éclairé le propos, en ce sens que l'OFPRA va demander une preuve. En fait, déjà, il faut reconnaître quelque chose, et je le dis en tant qu'experte et aussi en tant qu'activiste, il faut être honnête quand on mène un activisme, même contre ses adversaires. L'OFPRA, depuis 2015, a quand même évolué dans son traitement de la demande d'asile des personnes LGBTQI. Bon, a évolué un petit peu, pas beaucoup, mais il y a eu une ouverture grâce effectivement à un ancien directeur qui, lui, était un directeur qui venait déjà de la gauche et qui s'est ouvert à la question du féminisme et à la question de LGBTQI issues. Et il a même demandé des expertises, il s'est cultivé, il s'est informé, etc. Et tout. Et c'est vrai qu'on a remarqué quand même dans le traitement qu'il y avait plus quand même de demandeuses d'asile lesbiennes qui accédaient. Attention, c'est pas facile, hein, qui a accédé, mais pour peu que le récit, l'histoire qu'elle présentait était une histoire quand même cohérente. Alors, il faut faire attention quand on parle effectivement de preuve, apporter une preuve du lesbianisme. Je vais rester sur les lesbiennes, puisque c'est ça qui nous concerne, en tout cas qui me tient à cœur. Et Malissa a repris la question sur ce propos. C'est que on ne va pas demander une preuve, je dirais, matérielle. En tout cas, ce ne sera pas une preuve sexuelle. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne va pas, l'OFPRA ne va pas demander à la demandeuse d'asile, excusez-moi hein, du terme, comment elle fait l'amour. Bon. Combien de fois elle fait l'amour avec une femme? Combien de femmes elle a connues? Etc. C'est-à-dire qu'ils ne vont pas rentrer dans cette intimité-là. En tout cas, ils n'entrent plus en tout cas dans cette intimité-là. En revanche, il y aura toujours une contrainte quand même de la preuve sans que l'OFPRA dise que c'est une preuve. C'est une demande de preuve. You know? Donc, on joue un petit peu sur les… C'est un peu tendu, hein, on joue sur les expressions. En tout cas, une chose est sûre, au-delà de la contrainte de la preuve, il y a l'intime conviction. This is the point. You know? L'intime conviction. C'est-à-dire que la lesbienne qui va faire la demande d'asile, il faut qu'elle ait une force de conviction pour que l'officier, the interviewer, I mean, women or men, pour que l'intervieweur soit convaincu de son lesbianisme. You know?
Est-ce que je peux traduire maintenant?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Sabrine is saying my response to Melissa, Melissa, you clarified very well that the state asks for proof, And since I should say, just to be honest, because even with our adversaries, we have to be honest, that since 2015, the state has changed for the better in its way of dealing with people who are asking for refugee status. Because the director was a leftist who actually asked for advice from other people who know about it. And but now there's also the question of the narrative, because when they still want us to want the lesbians who are asking for asylum to prove and to convince that they are actually lesbians. So they don't ask for sexual proof. They don't ask for how people make love or how many women the lesbian has been with. They don't ask intimate questions, but instead there's still this proof, a demand for proof without asking for it directly. And the interviewer has to be convinced by the lesbian who's making the demand for asylum that she actually is a lesbian.
Merci beaucoup, Paola. Alors, bien sûr, quand la demandeuse d'asile va apporter un maximum de preuves matérielles, ça va conforter la motivation. C'est-à-dire, si elle était, par exemple, une lesbienne activiste et qu'elle a été interviewée par les médias, radio, journal, c'est un point positif. C'est-à-dire que c'est une preuve comme quoi, effectivement, elle a été persecuted or threatened because of her lesbian activism in OK.
Je vais traduire là. Sabrine est en train de dire que si la manière de donner des preuves, il y a plusieurs, bien entendu, mais la meilleure manière, c'est d'être...
En anglais, non? Tu devais traduire en anglais, non?
Pardon, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I was translating her because she was translating.
Excuse-moi,
She said that, that it should be that the person should give as much proof as possible, that the lesbian should give, and that it will work, especially if she's an activist, a public activist, and so she was interviewed on the radio or on TV, and she can prove that she's been persecuted as a lesbian activist, then she will have a very easy time, or a much easier time, let's say, from the, in trying to get a refugee status.
OK.
Merci.
Il y a
Je ne sais pas
aussi...
si on a le temps de...
Bon, en tout cas, je vais terminer juste 30 secondes et puis je termine. Really. Parce que c'est extrêmement important, parce que c'est politique et c'est en même temps une question politique et une question de, comment on appelle ça, aussi qui donne comment on appelle ça, une analyse sur la politique du droit d'asile en France, qui est une politique extrêmement catastrophique, qui est très, très, très complexe. Alors, un autre point consiste à dire que si, par exemple, l'OFPRA se trouve en face d'une demandeuse d'asile qui a un enfant, c'est-à-dire qui a, comment on appelle ça, qui est au fait dans un rôle, dans une posture hétérosociale. Avoir un enfant, alors en plus ça vient de l'Afrique, ça vient du Moyen-Orient, déjà on se méfie. Alors si en plus elle dit lesbienne et elle a un enfant, il y a suspicion, il y a tentative d'usurpation. Or, c'est là où nous, lesbiennes of color, avec notre expertise juridique, mais il faut aussi apporter un éclairage sociologique. Cette lesbienne demandeuse d'asile qui a un enfant, soit qu'elle va laisser au bled, soit qu'elle va ramener avec elle, c'est une lesbienne qui a été victime d'un mariage forcé et donc d'une grossesse forcée. Donc, il faut expliquer à l'OFPRA, dans la lettre de recommandation que nous allons faire, c'est pour ça que j'ai expliqué pourquoi l'OCS est devenu association, on va expliquer que sociologiquement, dans une communauté telle ou dans ce pays-là, au vu de la législation qui est législation lesbophobe ou homophobe, que sociologiquement, et même quand il n'y a pas, quand la loi est favorable aux LGBT, il peut y avoir en intracommunautaire, dans une communauté telle, parce que l'exige comment on appelle ça, les habitudes, les coutumes, les us, le condiraton, etc., la fille sera obligée, ou parce que la fille aurait une sexualité présumée ou effective, elle sera obligée de se soumettre à ces, comment on appelle ça, à ces habitudes-là. Donc, il faudra expliquer tout ceci à l'OFPRA, et c'est comme ça qu'on arrive effectivement à expliquer.
Okay. The last point that Sabrine is making about this is that it's politically very important that there's this question of the rights of exile, that in France, it's a rather catastrophic and complex situation, that if the, for example, if the lesbian has a child, then she can be seen as being in a, in a heterosexual setup, and so looks, the group has to clarify the situation sociologically, like what is happening there, that she could have been the victim of a forced marriage and therefore had a child. Lux also has to explain in a letter that Lux will write to the state that even in places where laws of homosexuality are, permit homosexuality, she can still be persecuted within her community. So it becomes very complex, and Lux plays a role of solidarity, to get back to the topic of our discussion, by actually making this sociological intervention.
Thank you very much, Paula.
Thank you. I think we may not have time, but if you have maybe one comment, Cirino, and
I was just wanting to respond to Melissa, but if there's no time.
Can you say it quickly?
Yeah. Well, one thing I agree absolutely that by the time a Ghanaian woman who would come here and apply for asylum, she has learned the LGBT lexicon. She would certainly call herself a lesbian. Yet, not everybody masters that master narrative of LGBT, So my project, coming from people like Sylvia Tamale, the author of Decolonialization and Afrofeminism, is not just to deconstruct homophobia and homosexuality in Africa, so not just to say these laws came from colonial times and we need to decolonize them, but also to try and reconstruct some and that's why I'm so much with language, because these are the traces, the indigenous languages. I find some traces of how could have been done before. And I'm not saying there was no, I don't even know how to call it, queer phobia before the current way we have it. There were certainly situations, but there were also very powerful women who had same-sex relationships, and it wasn't, nobody asked, what are you doing? Or maybe, I don't know. So, but just to say that I absolutely agree, and I would be totally pragmatic. I would have sleepless nights, but I would be totally pragmatic if one of my Ghanaian friends with kids, and she wasn't forced to have, she wasn't raped, I would say that for purposes of her getting the papers.
Yes.
Yet I would have sleepless night because of homonationalism, because of reinforcing the image, the single story of African homophobia, and that's what I'm trying to say. Or that's what makes it so difficult for me, that there are these subaltern, for lack of a better term, women who just disappear between the gaps. And it has much to do with intersectionality, because in the international language, sexuality is so much associated with pure sexuality issues, and these are men, but women are also women. So that complicates everything. So is it sexism? Is it homophobia? Is it, well, it could be anything and nothing. So I think that is one of the difficulties in also claiming rights for women. But the other thing is really that what I find so frustrating, that it's so hard that this language, I mean, I also use it strategically. I refer to myself as a lesbian, but nevertheless, the LGBT, we heard it yesterday with Noof and Noor. if we understand queer as a process and we don't want to draw the boundaries, then it's very difficult to be in these pragmatic politics at times. And then in the face of violence, where you're like, okay, but we have to do something, and that's the only way we have learned to be politically resistant. You know, that's we need the master's tools to construct the master's house. I mean, I'm trying to think otherwise, but that's what it seems to I seem to end up with.
Thank you so much. Thank you all three of you so very much for this amazing conversation. And we do have to end it now because we're like 15 minutes. We went way over. But here's the thing. I hope that we will all continue these conversations. We can't do it now. But I hope that I would love for us all to be in conversation with each other on this important topic, including around categories and vocabularies and solidarities, you know, outside of this. Right now we need to shift to say some organizers' remarks just to end this. If I may, I would like to just say to thank you to our more than 35 speakers who spoke during this entire 4 days of conversations. I think that we've had some amazing talks. We have had so many brilliant presentations. I want to thank the two artists who gave their artwork for the publicity. I'd like to thank our translators. You can find them online. We have them on the Decolonizing Sexualities Network Decolonial Cafe website. I also really want to thank Sandeep for doing last minute wonderful translations, and Sylvia also for handling so much of the translating work besides our official translators. I want to thank the other three organizers, four organizers, sorry, there were 5 of us who organized this. And I just thank you also to everyone who came and who, you know, sat there in silence to listen to what our wonderful speakers have to say about their presentations, but also to each other. May these conversations continue. May they always be fruitful. Thank you so much for joining us in the 10-year anniversary of the Decolonizing Sexualities Network, and we hope to see you at all of our future events as well. That's all that I wanted to say. Maybe the others have some things to say.
Thank you very, 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 very much, Paula, Sandeep, Sohriya, Sylvia. You know, we've been known now for many years, so it's also, you know, a pleasure, and it's quite exciting, you know, to share with you. I mean, very interesting panels. I'm very touched and very happy that Melissa, said something, you know, I wanted to you know, to hear about this, you know, from ages, where, you know, we were passionate, and now you can, I mean, explain as yourself, I mean, you want it. So it's wonderful, really. And Serena, it's, I mean, it was a pleasure, because I think it's my first time to meet you or something. Yeah, it's an honor and a pleasure, really. I'm from the east of Africa, from Djibouti, and so Ghana.
Yeah,
Of course, United Africa. But also, just a quick question, Melissa. So, what do you think about the word lesbian in Kabylian? I mean,
Je pense que les organisateurs sont crevés là depuis les pauvres. Ça fait 15 jours là, ils sont crevés. On aura l'occasion de reparler.
Elle peut y aller jusqu'à la fin du monde. Sabrine, même quand elle est crevée, elle continue. Hein. Je la connais, Sabrine, depuis des années.
On reparlera, Sabrine, on reparlera, c'est long.
Non, mais Sabrine, on est très passionnés aussi, et ta question est passionnante, mais on va continuer peut-être ailleurs, parce que maintenant on essaye de...
C'était une question d'ouverture.
Bah oui, non, mais
Voilà, j'étais intéressée.
ouverture, il faudrait quand même tout un colloque sur cette question. Elle est tellement fondamentale, hein, n'est-ce pas? Il faudrait quand même qu'on ait une colloque sur cette question. Merci, Adrien.
Lovely.
Oui, voilà,
Lovely.
c'est fondamental.
Lovely.
Sorry for those who don't understand French. We were almost going to go into another conversation, and then we thought, well, we're supposed to be closing this. So, but it's just an indication of all the passion that I think that the 4 days have.
Yeah, because it's lesbian power, you know. It's like
because
this.
Amazing also that we have a chance to have these discussions. And thank you, Sabrine, for asking.
Thank you.
A question at the end that I just mentioned we should actually have a whole conference on this, the question of the categories, the question of how we think, how of the inadequacy of LGBTQI as terms and queer as terms. And we did have a lot of discussion about it, but a whole conference would be great. However, now I wanted to ask the organizers if you wanted to say some words to wrap up. Or not.
Said it beautifully, Paola. So thank you. Thank you, Paola. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Nous, on adore Sabrine. We love Sabrine.
I love you too. I love you too, really.
Yeah, we love Sabrine, that's for sure, for years and years and years.
What has happened is this community spirit and the different conversations that have happened over the years for these last 10 years that have been happening, and which brought together this wonderful event, which I'm really sorry was supposed to be in Paris. Paris vous attend. And trust me, we will do it, and we will also do it in Punjabi. So thank you to everyone who came. Thank you so much for just sharing with us, to all the speakers, sharing with us your experience, your knowledge. We are better because of you. Thank you so much for that came as well. Thank you to Norma Alarcon who came every time for these 4 days that we've been. It's just been such a wonderful, uplifting experience. C'est tout ce que j'ai à dire. Sylvia?
Yes, if I may, I'll just be very brief. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been involved over the past 10 years. Of course, DSN is, it's a network grounded in not only these events, but long bonds of friendship. And this is what has sustained the network over difficult times, experienced very differently in different locations. But thank you so much for everyone who's been involved in different ways over time, and may these conversations carry on, as there is always an overflow in categories and in conversations. So I really look forward to the future exchanges that might come out of this. Thank you so much to everyone.